It's one of those scrap yards where they smush down cars into little cubes. Under Marco Rubio, the State Department is where broken things go. I mean, it's yet another sign that the State Department is not much of a priority, that Marco Rubio is supposed to be working full-time as Secretary of State there, but they have nevertheless also found ways to keep him busy with other jobs, including being the National Archivist and being the head of USAID and being the National Security Advisor and being the Viceroy of Venezuela. And all these other jobs they have been making up for him, while Trump's son-in-law Jared and the president's real estate friend Steve fly around the world instead of the Secretary of State during what sure looks like a we accept Venmo version of private for-profit diplomacy. And now, on top of all of these layers of failure, they have just made another change so that what remains of the CDC's capabilities in global health, what remains of CDC's capacity to do good stuff around the world to protect people from things like infectious disease outbreaks, for programs like PEPFAR, for example, the HIV program started by George W. Bush that has saved more than 25 million lives. The remaining CDC capacity to do good global public health work, a very, very necessary thing that nobody else in the world can pick up because we have let it for so long. That is all now, later this year, going to be taken over by Marco Rubio's State Department. They are going to further drastically reduce what remains of the CDC presence overseas, to replace it with the Department of Failure, the junk drawer department, Marco Rubio's Department of State. And this is happening right as we're learning that we've already cut our global health capabilities so much that we have just been blindsided by, surprise, the biggest Ebola outbreak in more than a decade, which already appears to be rapidly expanding in multiple countries before anybody got any sort of start on trying to contain it. It's the kind of thing you might want to ask the Health and Human Services Department chief spokesman for a comment on, except, oh yeah, he just quit, so there's nobody in that job. He quit last week, apparently in protest of Trump's demand that the FDA should approve fruit-flavored nicotine vapes that appeal to children. Make America healthy again, right? Don't worry, though. The president himself can handle a lot of this health stuff himself. He does appear really focused on it in a very specific way. Headline: Trump bought stock in drug maker as his government boosted its obesity drugs. Just before taking unprecedented action to boost the flagship obesity drug of the drug company Eli Lilly, Trump bought hundreds of thousands of dollars of stock in Eli Lilly. This happened while he's president. Joe Biden didn't trade stocks while he was in office. Barack Obama didn't trade stocks while he was in office. But Trump is apparently trading stocks while he is in office. And since we got his financial disclosure about those stock trades late last week, right, detailing this bizarre and incredibly energetic stock trading that the president has been doing while he has been president. Now, with each passing hour, we're getting more and more reporting coming out about how his stock buying as president tracks with things he's doing as president to boost the value of those stocks. I mean, it's just incredible. So in January, Trump buys hundreds of thousands of dollars of stock in NVIDIA. Then a week later, his Commerce Department approves the sale of NVIDIA chips to China. Also in January, Trump buys between $50,000 and $100,000 worth of stock in AMD, which is another chip maker. 1 week after he buys it, his Commerce Department approves AMD doing business in China as well. Following month, in February, Trump buys millions of dollars worth of stock in Dell. Dell Computers, right? Dell Technologies. 9 days after he buys millions of dollars worth of stock in Dell, Trump veers off script in a speech in Georgia to tell the crowd literally, quote, go out and buy a Dell computer. Then in March, he buys up a whole bunch of stock in a company called Thermo Fisher. Repeated purchases of Thermo Fisher. Judd Legum at Popular Information reports that Trump repeatedly buys up Thermo Fisher stock And then he goes and visits Thermo Fisher on a presidential visit. And on this presidential visit to Thermo Fisher, he praises the company repeatedly as an incredible company. He says, as president, that he wants other pharmaceutical companies to start working with Thermo Fisher. He buys their stock, and then he goes out and boosts the company as president. Judd Legum also notes that that same day, March 11th, same day as the Thermo Fisher visit, that same day, Trump bought hundreds of thousands of dollars of stock in Apple. And then that same day he bought the stock, he did another event where he singled out Apple and Apple CEO Tim Cook for praise. Apple, a great company. Then after that, Trump buys between $50,000 and $100,000 of Micron stock. Okay? Between $50,000 and $100,000 in Micron stock. The very next day, he calls into the Fox News channel and tells them, Micron, it's one of the hottest companies. Then it's Palantir, CNBC reporting. Trump makes 7 separate purchases of Palantir stock, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of Palantir stock. Then he gets on Truth Social and praises Palantir, Palantir Technologies. Great capabilities and equipment. He literally even posted the stock ticker abbreviation for Palantir right after he bought hundreds of thousands of dollars of their stock and got online to boost it, giving people the stock ticker abbreviation to make it easier for them to go buy some Palantir, to boost the value of the stock he just bought before he said this online. I mean, this just appears to be just fantastically, kaleidoscopically corrupt. Congressman Jamie Raskin is here tonight to talk about it. And also about the $1.8 billion that Trump says he's taking out of the U.S. Treasury so it can be doled out as, like, rewards or something.